Oh, hello. That was an unexpected beginning. Was that you giving yourself a warning? It's being recorded.
No, I think it's a new thing from Zoom. Obviously, privacy. It never used to tell people they were being recorded.
Okay, I like that. Never have I before in the history of...
But now you get to consent and you can leave the meeting if you don't want to be recorded.
Go figure. The world is changing and we're all adapting and flexing all the way. So welcome to the Good Listening To show here on UK Health Radio with me, Chris Grimes. This is the show that brings you The Clearing, where all good questions come to be asked, I think you'll find, and all good stories come to be told. And yes, we're here on Zoom and we're straddling several platforms because we're going to video it, but also we're going to be putting it onto the UK Health Radio show place as well, and then pulling it in to the podcast. Hurrah! So it's all to play for. This is the wonderful Alex Moyle, who I've been very, very excited to speak to. He is an extremely lovely chap. He's a motivational force. He's a motivational speaker, thinker, well, an all-round motivational geezer, I think.
Oh, motivational geezer. I like that.
Well, you've been really so helpful to me, and in the world of leadership and sales and motivation and everything that I know you're all about, you've been both those things, been motivational to me. You've helped. You gave me a microphone because you're a lovely, generous man. You just said, here, if you're doing your podcasts, here's a microphone. I've subsequently upgraded since you gave me that leap. You also helped me with the podcast logo. You've also given me lots of advice. So anyway, in the law of reciprocity, it's my great pleasure to give something back to you, to blow some smoke back at you, Alex Moyle.
Thank you very much, Chris. Well, I think it's been mutually beneficial. I get a lot from our conversations, and as we'll probably talk about, I love helping people do better and be better. So that's in fact, I find it harder when I'm not doing that. So.
Yeah, you are a force of energy. I've really experienced that. And I was going to say that you're an archetypal, if I may, servant leader, in that your whole demeanor is, how can I help? Which is why you are such a good motivational force. And you, as I say, sincerely, you've been very motivational to me. So I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you very much, Chris.
So here's your chance to be bathed in the glorious sunlight of the Good Listening To show Clearing. I'm going to bounce you along the normal metaphors of the route map of the clearing, a tree, some alchemy, some gold, some Shakespeare, and a cake. Hurrah!
And I've got a Shakespeare quote. Because when I was doing the preparation, you said, what's your favorite quote? And one of my favorite quotes is a Shakespeare quote. So unusually, I'm going to be able to sound sophisticated and erudite, other than the fact that that is my only Shakespeare quote.
But you're sophisticated and erudite. I hear you. We first met when you just came out of the woodwork, when you came to see an Instant Wit show, the comedy improvisation company that I've been co-running with a lovely person called Stephanie Weston here in Bristol for many years. You just arrived and we spoke very spontaneously in the bar, and you said, where can I learn more about this? And then you came to France, to lesuranglais.com, where once a year, a zombie apocalypse notwithstanding, we do something called Instant Wit Laughter Lab. You know, it will be on again, and thank you for coming to that too.
No, it was good. I liked it. It was good to get a few days in France, and very kind of my wife to let me have those few days in France because she was left with two busy children.
Behind every great motivational force of a man is an even more awesome woman. We all know that.
Yes, indeed.
So let's get you talking. If someone doesn't have a particular frame of reference to you and just meets you and goes, oh, hello, what do you do? What's your favorite way of avoiding or answering that question, Alex Moyle?
I guess I sort of go, I help people be better at what they do, generally leaders and salespeople. That's sort of my thing. I think I describe it to my kids as I help grown-ups be better. I'm like a teacher for grown-ups.
I love that too.
So
motivational geezer and just teacher for grown-ups. I love that.
That's right. And they go, does that mean you could come teach in our school? And I go, no, because normally when I'm teaching grown-ups, if they don't do some of the things I suggest, they maybe get fired.
Yes.
So it's a different sell when someone's expected to engage with what you're doing, where their teachers of children are trying to hard sell people things and ideas and concepts where the people in the room have no understanding of the immediate benefit or reference of what they're trying to be taught. So yeah, hats off to teachers.
And it's your currency, by the way, and the elixir of everything that you bring is a really positive energy. So in the comedy improvisational realm of yes and, that's why I find it so easy, genuinely, to relate to you. So you are we're peas from the same pod, as they say.
Thank you.
Oh, pish and tush and have some smoke. You've earned it. So
Yeah.
what then is a clearing like for you? We're getting going now on the Good Listening To show metaphors. What is a clearing like for you, Alex Moyle? Where do you go to get clutter-free, inspirational, and able to think?
Well, the challenge I've got is I think a lot. I think all the time in my sleep, and the problem is I overthink. So the only time I can really lose my ability to think is when I'm doing some sort of extreme activity. So if I'm going for a long bike ride or going for a run. So generally it requires some sort of physical effort or exposure to some sort of pain for my brain to be focusing on something else other than all the things I think I should be or could be doing in life.
I'm even hearing there that you sort of run in your sleep metaphorically as well. So are you a sort of pretty energetic dreamer as well?
Yeah, I mean, I sleep talk. I get up. I think probably my favorite. There's two stories I'd always share about my sleep talking. One is I almost murdered my future wife because I thought we were being attacked. So I dragged her across the bed in her sleep by her neck, which wasn't very good. And then I was sleepy. I was staying at a friend's house who lived in a house in Bristol, and they lived in a loft. So that half the ceiling was sloping. And I remember waking the whole house up, holding the roof up, going, get up, the roof's falling down. So that sort of sums me up, really.
Remind me not to come for a sleepover.
Yeah, no, it's and then I wake up pretty early. Once the eye cracks open, the dynamo begins, and that's when my day starts.
Oh, say that again. When the eye cracks open, the dynamo begins.
Yeah,
Don't ever start chopping wood, because if somebody gives you an axe for a present, we've all got to start worrying.
Yeah.
Particularly when you go to bed, when it's the time of the twilight time.
Yeah. The problem is that my eye cracks open, the dynamo starts, and then the other half of my brain is trying to put the brake on, going, what are you doing, you idiot? You need sleep.
And by the way, what a great force of nature you therefore are. So I think that's partly it obviously is what drives you, but I think that's what's so infectious about you in how you enable others through, I suppose, keeping up with the wonderful currency and sort of charge that you bring of energy.
Oh, thank you very much.
It's so much more in the coaching that I do, by the way. It's so much more difficult to get people to upgrade their energy. It's always much, much better to get people to sort of, calm it down slightly. Put the brakes on, as you say. You know, when I first went to drama school, I was analogized to being like an untrained Labrador. I'll come in, lick your face, get distracted, come back in, hump your leg, do a poo in the corner, and go somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, no, and continually looking for food, no doubt. Although your build wouldn't suggest that.
And in fact, one of the last times we saw each other during, I think, lockdown part 2, we when we could socially distance, we went for a walk with your very new puppy, which is another way to apply your energy.
Yes, indeed. And that's been very useful in making sure I get out and at least exercise the brain.
Wonderful. So now I'm going to arrive with a tree now. I've slightly confused myself as to exactly where your clearing is, because it's just this big energetic scape. So where can I arrive to sort of plant me flag in the sand with a tree?
It's, I guess, the planting of the tree is, how do you harness the point where you're trying to direct the energy into something that's productive and useful? That might be the place to start, because that might mean the tree focuses the energies of that. I don't know.
I tell you what,
let's assume that works in the metaphor.
Let's assume your eyes just cracked open, the dynamo's about to begin, and I'm there going kaboff, a bit like Waiting for Godot. Here's a tree, kaboff, existentially, here it is.
Yeah.
And now we're going to shake your tree to see how you like these apples, which is the lovely storytelling construct whereby, as you know, you've had 5 minutes, Alex Moyle, to have thought about 4 things that have shaped you, 3 things that inspire you, 2 things that never fail to grab your attention. Squirrels, borrowed from the film Up. And then 1 quirky or unusual fact about you we couldn't possibly know until you tell us. So over to you, crunch the apples as you see fit.
So let's see where we go. So we start with the 4 things that have shaped you. So I'm going to use 2 of those for my parents in both different ways, because I was brought, my parents were, well, lucky or unlucky enough to separate when I was quite young. So I was brought up by my dad. And so he shaped me, because even though life was difficult and the money he had in his pocket was the money we had, he never gave up, and he always worked to make it better, and was an ever present force in believing anything is possible, to his detriment sometimes, but also supporting the enthusiasms of a child who probably back in the day before syndromes was probably ADHD, and the collection of different sports equipment in the hallway would show you the number of fads that I had from cricket to hockey to polo even once, unbelievable.
Whoa.
Through to swimming, through to tennis, all manner of things. None of them I was particularly good at, but he was very supportive all the same.
And of course, the confusion happens when you mix up the polo with the swimming, and then lots of horses drown. Water polo. See what I did there?
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that. So yeah, I'm trying to think of drowning horses. It's maybe that's what water polo was. It's the horses have gone, and you're just left with riders that are swimming around trying to fight for the ball.
Well, back in the day, with the first ever marathon runner ran 26 miles and then unsurprisingly died. That's why I probably wouldn't do a marathon myself.
Yeah, although I'll give you a random fact. Do you know why the marathon is 26.2 miles?
No.
Because the distance he ran was not 26.2 miles, because it's the distance from central London to the gates of Windsor Castle for the first Olympic Games. And that is 26.2 miles, and that defined the distance of the modern day marathon.
I love that. I thought we were going to go ancient Greek for the curious fact, but that was London and Windsor.
I think he ran about 80 or something like that. But he ran a long way.
So that's why he died back in the day, whoever the first marathon runner was.
And it was probably 40 degrees, and he probably didn't have any water.
Yeah, go figure. So before getting back to you talking about your dad being this wonderful, supportive force, just reading between the lines there, is he still with us? I was just interested.
He checked out early. He never liked desserts, so I like to say he checked out at the end of the main course of life. Annoyingly, he was very handy, and he died before I had a flat, and he could teach me anything about DIY. So every time I have to learn something new for DIY, I'm annoyed that he died early, because he should have been teaching me what I'm in the process of messing up. But he lived a good life, and it's one of those things. I guess that would be one of the things that, if you were to go to the next one, him dying when I was in my early 20s would be one of the things that sort of shapes you a little bit, because it sort of reminds you got to crack on and get on with life, really.
Lovely. And sorry, not lovely that he died, obviously, sorry. No. Lovely fact. But your optimistic lens on it is really very nice to notice, actually.
Yeah, I think I'm generally very optimistic, and the more optimistic I get, the more I'm probably trying to hide a counsellor or a therapist would say, oh, you're hiding the pain that's deep inside, let it out. Well, I've never really seen much benefit in dwelling on the past. So I generally tend to
appreciate, we may talk about this later on, but I know in the time we've known each other over the last couple of years, you have mentioned ADHD as something you might have been diagnosed with late on. We may or may not talk about that, but that's up to you.
No, I mean, I've only recently been diagnosed, and like I think many people in lockdown, if you look at musicians, artists, I do a lot of speaking at events. When you hear those people talk, they talk about presenting and performing as their mental outlet, their place where they lose their mind and actually are just in the flow. Although I'm using something that I'm going to be talking about later. And so lockdown was hard because that outlet disappeared.
Yes.
And I'm, as a performer and actor yourself, you can probably empathize with just you don't realize how much you depend on that buzz of running around, presenting, delivering, coaching, training to sort of...
Yes, and by the way, that's completely relatable, because, this whole podcast for me got about because I needed some other outlet, which was related to the giving a good listening to that I do as a coach. And in fact, the initial, I've got a Zoom hole, that's my only outlet, was quite constricting at first, but now quite liberating. So we've all adapted and adjusted in that way.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back in the room with people and human beings. It must be said. I think I think like Zoom is a poor substitute for reality.
That's another great quote too. Zoom is not a great.
Because I come up with these little catchphrases. You ask me tomorrow, I won't even remember what they are. So
We'll just
you can,
transcribe this for the gold that lies within. And by the way, we're going to talk about alchemy and gold. So you're giving me this in spades already. So now
cool.
we're into the second thing that has shaped you overtly in the structure of shaking the tree.
Yeah. So, I mean, my mother would be the other one. And whilst she wasn't around when I was growing up much, like her, she's shown great tenacity in life in terms of sort of sorting out her own life and sort of us having a good relationship today where that works with my kids as well. So, and that's sort of, like I never had any grandparents. I think both my dad's side died before I was really born. And my mum's, basically, I never knew a grandparent. So it's great to have that sort of grandparents around and understand how that sort of relationship works for kids, really. So
reading between the lines, what I'm also noticing is that you are a real force of autonomy. You've been very self-sufficient. Your dad left you at an earlier age, but you've been very self-sufficient and you're eager to learn, even the DIY stuff that you say you've had to learn on the hoof.
yeah, I mean, I came to the conclusion probably by about the age of 10 that the only person I could really rely on in life was myself. So my wife calls it the island of Moyle. And she's tried to expand that island, but in on my day, I go back to that because that's ultimately I'm the only person I can rely on, and that's on a good day. And that's sometimes that's not saying much if that's what I'm relying on. So, but
although, if I may, the island of Moyle is now where we are positioning the tree. I love that.
There we are. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the if we were looking at what shaped me, like everything I do is I have to take ownership from, good and bad, and the situations you find yourself in are the result of the decisions that you've made. And I guess I've learned really early in that if you want life to change, the only way you're going to be able to change that is if you make that happen. Because in the main, good things don't happen to people that sit on their ass.
Yes, and I've heard a quote recently, which you'll probably enjoy, which is the difference between what you want and what you get is what you do. So it's the action towards, and also as life,
and then the tension between that is procrastination.
Boom! You see, we're on fire. This is gold.
Oh yeah.
And someone else dear to me in the world of, who's helped me during this period, a chap called Dave Stewart, mentioned that if life hits you a curveball or a surprise, it's, plot twist. And then you've just got to, it's not over till it's over. You've just got to keep going.
The problem is plot twist implies it's going to turn again quite quickly. The problem is when the plot twist is prolonged.
And it becomes a vortex or a sinkhole. Yes, no one's saying this is easy, but you've got a really good strategy to keep on swimming, keep on doing, keep on acting, and keep your energy and keep your optimism. And that's such a good philosophy.
Yeah, well, this is another catchphrase. This is going to be, we should call this one Catchphrase City, which is
Moyle Island. Catchphrase City is the capital.
So along with the plot twist, you can say when you're in the middle of a plot twist, it feels like you'll look back on it and realize it was a flash in the pan. The problem is when you're in the flash in the pan, it feels like you're burning alive.
Yes.
And that sort of, it's a bit like the first 3 years of having kids. It's just relentless. Yes. And it feels like you're burning alive. And you look back now and go, that was horrible, but it was a phase. But when you're in the phase, it doesn't feel very good.
And imagine being a firefly. You just always think, my bum's on fire, but actually all you're doing. We're riffing over here. Okay, so I think we're still shaking the apples of inspiration.
Here's a quick question for you. If a fly flies bum on fire, when they go for a wee, do you get a little cold spot?
That's a great question. So answers on a postcard to Alex Moyle. That's never a question that's ever been posed on the radio airwaves before. So we're back to shaking your tree. I think we've done all the things that have shaped you. Now we can talk about inspiration, if you like.
Yeah, I think I am inspired by people that force me to have perspective on what life is. So I'm a bit like Barack Obama many years ago said that if you were to pick a moment in history to be born, you would pick right now, because there has never been a better time in history to be born. If you were dropped randomly around the world, there is less people in poverty today than any time in history. I read a book that was sort of the power of numbers. And whilst we talk about poverty, I think it was something, he said something like every day or every minute or hour for the last 40 years, 150,000 people have been dragged out of extreme poverty. And it was about the fact that we focus on bad things happen quickly, good things happen slowly. So therefore you never notice the good things that are happening.
Yes.
And so I'm very, my default to help me get to where I've got to means I always think things could be better. And the only way you think things could be better if you make sure you focus on why what you've got is shit. And over time, you might achieve a lot, but sometimes you then take for granted the things you do have.
Yes.
So
again, there's that currency of energy towards, which I'm still hearing in your general philosophy.
Yeah. So for instance, if I go for a run, I have certain streets I run down, and if I want to have perspective, I run a certain direction in my house because that reminds me that I live somewhere quite nice. And if I think I should be doing better, I take a right and then I head to the bigger houses thinking I should be doing better. I should be living there. I've got a friend at the moment just down the road who has found himself in a situation where he works basically 5 days a month and can do all the hobbies he wants and basically play squash in the day. And he thinks he's made it. Where my brain would work, what are you doing with the other 15 days? Surely you could achieve more.
Yes.
What are you doing? And so I need to hang around with people that provide perspective on whether life is as bad as sometimes I think it is, which is not.
And I'm also hearing a bit of an occasional dissatisfaction with the status quo, therefore. So you might think you've made it, but then it's about where you go next.
Yeah, the problem is I've never recognized anything I've achieved. Like it is like the moment I achieve something, I've already moved on to the next thing.
So maybe you should take succor from greater instances of stillness where you acknowledge that I've got this far and it's time to take a bit of a metaphorical tea break.
Yes, everything I look at the whole world with a lens of how should I be making it better, not recognizing how fantastic what I've got is.
So the advice is that the invitation is that occasionally, very occasionally, because I love your energy, but very occasionally it's to take a bit of a chill pill and celebrate the success of look where I've arrived before I go next.
Indeed. And that's and so people that can help me do that inspire me because so for instance, when you see people that have had tremendous adversity in life, whether it be physical, mental, experiential, and they are publicly excited, but inside and at home they will be struggling with that, but they put on the game face and they've worked to make it work. And that when I've got my health, I've got a fantastic family and I'm fortunate enough to live in a nice house, I need to recognize the value of that more.
And the adage is, life is a wicked mess and we're all just winging it.
That is true. I think, and there's been a few movies lately that inspire me. So like The Greatest Showman was a great movie for perspective because it was all about, all he wanted was more and more and more, and he hadn't recognized the value of what he had.
Ooh, go figure.
So that was a
remind
good
you of anybody?
Pardon?
Does that remind you of anybody?
No, that's the thing. Is like I listened to it and I was like, and that really, I'm quite good at seeing the metaphors in those sort of movies. So I was like, right, okay, and that helps for a while. And then the other one that came out at Christmas was Soul.
Ah, yes, that's fantastic. About the gig of the lifetime, fall down a drain hole. Yes.
Wonderful. And it was the metaphor at the end was it's the journey, not the destination.
Yes.
And the journey is actually where the joy of life is, not in finding was it zing? It was your thing, wasn't it?
Or your thing was your thing.
Yeah. So, and then the other one I watched was was it not Henderson's versus the Machines, but it's Mitchell's versus the Machines, which is the latest one on Netflix.
Okay.
And that's about families coming together and appreciating the differences in the family and valuing the time you've got before the machines take over the world.
And philosophers ad infinitum before us have said stuff like carpe diem, seize the day.
Yeah, I mean, that one's particularly focused on seeing the value in the kids and the kids seeing value in the parents, which is easy to, especially in the last year, it's very easy to lose perspective of. So
yes. We are blessed indeed, and we have lots to be grateful for, even in adversity, actually, because even in the darkness, there's this idea that there's a golden thread that's going to pull you towards your future.
Yeah, and there's plenty. There's always some. The thing is with COVID, everyone, it's been a different type of poison for everybody.
That's a great way to frame it.
Like
Say that again. I love that. It's been a different type of poison for everybody.
Yeah, so I had a friend who was furloughed on 70 grand for 9 months, and he's single.
Oh,
and I'm like, I could have done with 9 months like that. But then he was struggling because he found it lonely.
yeah.
Right? Like he couldn't find a girl for like all the things that you would want, like the companionship. And I was like, mate, look, we can form a mini bubble. You can come and look after my kids for a week. Honestly,
Have you heard that expression? Your nightmare is somebody else's dream. So this is all about. Sorry if it's getting a bit cheesy, but it's just this idea of perspective. Keep perspective and keep an even keel, Mr. Christian, to quote Mutiny on the Bounty. There
we are. I'm not. When Mutiny on the Bounty, isn't that Gilbert and Sullivan?
No. Mutiny on the Bounty is a film way back when, where Fletcher Christian, and it's about it's a historical fact. The Mutiny.
You're far more theatrical than me, Chris. You remember those types of quotes.
There is a boat. Sorry, there is a good ship, something or other within Gilbert and Sullivan. Absolutely, but I can't remember now what it is.
And doing improv for as long as you have, a good Gilbert and Sullivan relevance and Mutiny on the Bounty relevance. A quick question for you. Do you find it hard to keep your references contemporary, or do you have to find audiences that are of a certain demographic so all your gags from 20 years ago still work?
Well, there's a universality to my gags, to give you a short answer, in that I've always, they're rooted in loving Stan Laurel back in the day. So I'm going for slapstick or universality, but also, I'm a bit of a joke hoover, a story hoover. I'm terrible at reading textbooks, but I just bank stuff. And then generally speaking, I can generally break through to make people laugh. So I don't put myself under the pressure of always making it culturally spot on. I don't need to read the news the day before I do it, because it's not that sort of comedy.
And I pity anyone that sees me on stage for the first time and your first instant whip back, because presentations are always alive when your stories are fresh and you've rehearsed them and you've crafted them, and you've there's all our little stories are so deep in the vault. Like someone in your crew will be saying something and you'll be like, just 1 minute, I had a line for that once. And then you'll go back and, oh yes, this is it. This is the one.
Oh, and by the way, my own framing on that is this idea of what I like is prepare for the freestyle. So even in this conversation, I've accessed story quick snippets in our exchange that I wasn't expecting to be talking about. Yeah, so it's the joy of spontaneity. Yes, and
that's why when I do podcasts or speeches or webinars, I write bullet points rather than a script, because A, I don't have the attention to write a script. B, I probably don't have the attention to learn it. And C, I wouldn't use it anyway.
Yes, so, and indeed, being more spontaneous and doing what we're doing, prepare for the freestyle, certainly works for me. And I'm keeping us to the structure. That is my preparation, like you just said, mind mapping. So I think we're now on to 2 things that never fail to grab your attention.
This is a good one. So first one is half of everything. So half of the world distracts me. And then the other half of the world is my second thing. So generally, the world distracts me from everything. Anything in the world can distract me from what I am doing right now.
That's such a lovely articulation of, squirrels, everything's distracting.
It's a bit like, at the moment, my neighbours have got building work going on. So there's builders and skip suppliers. So I spend my whole day going, building site. I just watch a building site tick by. They've got a delivery. They must be on this stage of the build now. I've just seen they've got wood. They've got breeze blocks. They've got thermalite there. That's interesting.
You're a bit of a curtain twitching neighbour, then, I'm hearing.
Well, I've got a fantastic spot in the road where I live on a corner and I look down my road, so I can see everything going on. So I can be curtain twitching if I chose.
This is Alex Neighbourhood Watch Moyle.
Although an interesting story about that once, we had a policeman knock on our door, and he was like, "Excuse me, I was wondering whether we could put a video camera in that window there." And we were like, "Why is that?" And he says, "Well, I can't really tell you, other than someone in that direction we want to be keeping an eye on."
Yes, and it's
we
your
live
friend.
in a nice, leafy suburb, so we were like, "Ooh, who could it be?"
Lovely. That's a bit of a distraction right there. Did you say yes to the camera being put there?
We did. And then they came back a week later and went, it's okay. We don't need to now.
Lovely. They've moved
They,
on.
and then we knew who it was because someone had disappeared from the street.
Love that. An alien abstraction right there on camera in front of Alex Moyles' house. Lovely. And now one quirky or unusual fact about you that we couldn't possibly know until you tell us.
I'm a pretty open book, to be fair. For someone that's very chaotic and seemingly pretty haphazard, I'm pretty anal about everything lining up on a PowerPoint presentation. And so, like, when you show me a set of PowerPoint slides, if something's not aligned, I'm on it. And the other weird thing is I'm dyslexic and I'm fantastic at spotting other people's grammatical errors, but show me my stuff, I can't see it for love nor money.
I love that. That's deliciously quirky, idiosyncratic, and totally individual. We are both individuals. I'm an individual. I'm
an individual.
I am Spartacus. Lovely, quirky fact. So not only will you bring wonderful, bounding energy, you'll also cross the T's and dot the I's. I like that.
Well, yeah, I will. I think it's probably because I'm a bit obsessed with being right and having the final word. So I'm brilliant at spotting what other people haven't done. I'm less open when people spot it in me.
Lovely. By the way, in the early part of the podcast, you were just brilliant at going, no. If you want a podcast logo, it needs to be Bosch like this. And even, if you look at the podcast logo, Alex Moyle has been very, very instrumental in nudging me in the right direction. And you've nudged me about structure and about length as well.
If there was an Olympics event for unsolicited advice, I would be in there. Like, you don't even need to ask for advice. I'm more than happy to point out things that aren't right and how you could be better, and seemingly with no actual knowledge or awareness of the topic I'm talking about.
And let me award you with a gold medal right here on the top podium, Alex Moyle, gold medal for being a servant leader and an awesome human being that's all about helping others to be better, which is a wonderful accolade, actually, in all sincerity. And using the idea of a gold medal, that gives us a wonderful segue into what's coming next. We've shaken your tree. Now we're staying in the clearing, but moving away from the tree. And we're going to talk about alchemy and gold now, which you've been giving me by the bucket, or indeed skip load, because you've got the building work going on outside your house. So when you are at purpose and in flow, Alex Moyle, what do you like to bring to the world?
I like to help people do better. And nothing gives me more pleasure than to help someone achieve their goal. And whether that be through unsolicited advice or even solicited advice or being very objective, nothing gives me more pleasure. I spent a large part of my career as a recruiter, and helping someone get a great job that they're excited about makes you feel good. And deep down, you hope they might like you too. And so, like have you ever seen the movie Minority Report?
Yes, it's been a while. It's Tom Cruise.
So the premise is that there's these three beings called precogs, and they're in this bath and they have these hats on, and they get visions of crimes that are going to be committed before they're committed. It's a Tom Cruise movie. And the Minority Report is when two of them think a crime is going to be committed and one of them doesn't, but they still act on the two, even though it's not a consensus. But I always figured that I would love to be a precog for problem solving, where I just lay down and people brought problems and I could just help people solve problems. So
you can leave your head to medical science and we'll gear you up with all the wiring required to make you what did you call the type of cog you'd be? A precog. Precog,
but they're seeing problems before they happen. So I'm probably a curcog, which is a current cognition, or I don't know what it'd be. Post-cog, something like that.
Love that. And yeah, congratulations. That's an awesome thing. And by the way, it's so, you're such a fixer. And anyone listening will know that if you want someone to give some sort of creative lens or perspective onto a current, sand in the gear block you're having, Alex Moyle is the man to get in touch with. I will invite you to
the flip side to that is if you need someone to listen to you and just to say, yes, it'll be better tomorrow, I am not the person to call. And that's not based on what I say, that's based on what my wife would tell you. Because she has to explicitly go, I'm just going to talk and I need you to not say anything. Okay, Mr. Fix-It needs to stay away. And she's talking, and I'm like, and I'm like, have you finished now? Okay, there, it'll be better. And I have to go outside and just sort of jog about.
By the way, I love the insight into the marital dilemma there of Mr. Fix-It needs to stop fixing it and be quiet. I love that. Taming the beast of the Alex Moyles. I love that.
Well, you can read a bit more about that if you read Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus and John Gray, and he talks about Mr. Fix-It. And that's sort of the when my wife goes, I don't need fixing, I just need to just work through it. Okay.
And it's a bit like Dances with Wolves or the converse for men barking at the moon, probably.
Something like that.
Wonderful. So thank you for that Alchemy and Gold about being Mr. Fix-It and Mr. Precog. Now I'm going to award you with a cake, Mr. Alex Moyle. So this is a deliberately multi-layered cake whereby it's open to interpretation. This is the legacy of our conversation. So the invitation to you is to talk about a favorite inspirational quote that's always pulled you towards your future. What help, guidance or advice might you proffer to a younger version of yourself? And or now inspired by a bit of Shakespeare, and this is where we can invite you to bring in your Shakespeare if you want, inspired by Shakespeare's All the World's a Stage and all the men and women merely players. The invitation is for you to share your legacy and how, Alex Moyle, you would most like to be remembered.
Right, okay, so what advice would I give myself? So, and this is one I have to remind myself of regularly, and it comes from a book that I read in my 20s called The Greatest Salesman in the World by a guy called Og Mandino. And it's a series of sort of one-page scrolls of life principles. And the first one is, this too shall pass. And this isn't a lesson to my past self, it's probably a lesson to my current self. I need to remind myself of that more, that this too shall pass, because it's probably not going to make that much difference. Today is not going to make that much difference over a period of life. Then you want another bit of advice, do you, or do you just want one layer of it, one bit of advice?
This could be, advice you might give to a younger version of yourself.
What would I say? I don't know. I really don't know, because I don't feel I've progressed much from being younger. The things I give myself a hard time about today are probably the things I gave myself a hard time about back then. But
with the gift of hindsight, therefore, is there anything?
Gift of hindsight, you know what? I probably wouldn't change much. Like, I'm not very. Whilst I'm very creative and imaginative in solving other people's problems, my ability to see a different pathway for myself is relatively limited. So
wonderfully human, by the way. It is wonderfully human.
So I'm not sure what that says, but yeah. So it's I probably put more effort into solving other people's problems. No, I put a reasonable amount of effort into trying to solve mine. But anyway. So, and then my quote, my Shakespearean quote, is Hamlet, Act 2, Scene 2. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
I'm just letting that hang there with a delicious bit of silence. Say it again and we'll let it hang there.
Act 2, Scene 2. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And as with most Shakespearean quotes, it's obviously written in the Old English, and the meaning has been slightly twisted and taken out of context. But that's the whole point of quotes, right? No one has to read the rest of the book.
And there's an adaptation even where I think it's Eleanor Roosevelt or Eleanor Roosevelt said that if you think you can or you think you can't, then you're probably right, which is a variation on the same theme. But Hamlet said it better.
My next quote is, I'm a big one for quotes, and these are quotes that I learned in my 20s that I lived a lot by, and I used to repeat them to myself because I was a big self-talker back in the day. Was a credit belongs to the person in the arena with blood, sweat, and sand on their brow. In fact, I'm going to bring it up because it's worthy. It's worthy. It's worthy.
It is worthy.
It's worthy of. So obviously, the original quote talks about a man. That is wrong in the context of today's world and was probably wrong then. So it's a Theodore Roosevelt quote. So we'll go in. Here we go. Right. Okay. You ready for this, Chris?
Yes.
it's not the critic who counts. It's not, I'm going to say man, but when I talk about man, it is in the context of the human race rather than the male gender. So it is not the critic who counts. It is not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. Credit belongs to the human who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and coming short, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, great devotions, and who spends their life in a worthy cause, who at best knows the triumph of high achievement, who at worst, if they fail, at least fails while daring greatly, so their place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory or defeat.
Boom. And just credit the source of that again. You said Roosevelt, didn't you?
It's Theodore Roosevelt. And he gave it in 2010. Yeah.
Makes me think of I Am Spartacus right there.
Oh, it's like
advocacy.
The thing is, I used to back in, you know what? I think what you should do, Chris, is not ask what advice would you give your former self. You should ask what advice would your former self give yourself today that you don't lead in today? Because I would probably tell myself from the past, are you still reading things that make you think positively? And the answer would probably be no. So
yes,
there we are.
Framing and reframing there.
Again, more unsolicited advice to help someone that hasn't asked for any help.
But you've helped me already, and you continue to help me. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be associated with you in this wonderful context. So how would you most like to be remembered? Let's go there now. So when all is said and done, and this wonderful, energetic sort of and by the way, you're very relatable. You're like me. You're a bit of a washing machine on fast spin cycle. And I mean that as a compliment, because it takes one to know one. How would you most like to be remembered, Alex Moyle, when all is said and done?
A decent bloke that tried to help people be better. Right, that's
yes. We're nearly at the drop the mic point. Alex Moyle, where can we find out more about you on the internet, please?
I'm on LinkedIn, like everybody else. You can find me at alexmoyle.co.uk. I live in Bristol, so you can hunt me down there. But yeah, just I'm around and about, just looking for people to give unsolicited advice to, or I think, is it brutal honesty or realistic candor? One of the two. I'm happy.
What I hear you bring is just energetic, positively framed perspective.
There we are. Well, that's a good way of putting it. So
remember, you are a motivational geezer, as far as I'm concerned, and I mean geezer as geezer, but also geezer. What a ground spring of awesome energy!
Fantastic. So what you're saying is that I have a lot of power, but it goes in one direction and it's temporary.
Well, but it's going to be back, like all geothermic forces. It's going to come back. So you're like a sort of human Yellowstone Park, but based near Bristol, please.
And I stink of rotten eggs.
All of that. Yes, and you're riffing beautifully there. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to me, Chris Grimes, and this has been the wonderful, as I say, motivational force of energy and the motivational geezer that is Mr. Alex Moyle. So I'm just going to say goodbye to you and do a quick outro for our listeners. Thank you, Alex Moyle, and good night.